What's up, Navigating Academia family? This is your buddy Dr. Phoenix Singh, your personal academic mentor, coming at you to be able to discuss what my perceived 5 worst things that you could say would be to the question, so what's your biggest weakness? Now, obviously I have a complimentary video to this one, which I'm going to be releasing here shortly on the channel that you can keep your eyes out for, which is what are the 5 best weaknesses that you can identify during a grad school interview. But today we're going to be talking about the 5 that drive me absolutely crazy, and these are 5 that I've actually heard in practice. So let's go ahead and go through each of them. Now, just because I say each of these 5 doesn't mean that there are not many different iterations of these 5, but these are 5 you want to make sure that you stay away from at all costs. Now, if you're interested in this kind of content, be sure to subscribe to the channel and to be sure to recommend it to your friends, colleagues, and students, because honestly, we're trying to grow as fast as we can as a channel. It's going great so far, and such a blessing to be able to have each and every one of you along for the journey. Also, smash that like button, please. Doesn't cost you anything, helps us grow the channel even more. So without further ado, let's go ahead and we're going to start with number 1 in terms of the worst weaknesses. What are the worst things that you can say when you're asked that question? Number 1 is something along the lines of, I'm bad at time management. Could also be something like, or it could take the form of, I leave things to the last minute. This is a terrible thing to say, and I have heard it more than once, because people, and I respect it, are trying to be very serious about this is a gigantic weakness of mine. But something like this is going to set off all kinds of alarm bells in the mind of your potential graduate school supervisor. And so the thing is that a lot of these grad school supervisors are being funded predominantly based on grant research. And this means that they have very tight deadlines. And even if they're not funded based on grant work, still they're going to have things that need to get done very, very quickly. For example, grading essays, even using a Scantron machine to be able to grade tests. You name it, things need to get turned around on time. So if you say that you're bad at time management or that you leave things to the last minute, that suggests that the quality of your work is going to be significantly below that of people a bit more meticulous than yourself. So that is not a good weakness. That's number 1. Number 2 is to say something along the lines of you being bad at statistics or research methods or something. I literally heard somebody once say that they hate statistics, right? They hate stats. But the thing is that if you're going to be entering a field where stats or research in general is kind of the framework or the foundation of that field, then saying you hate these things is not great. For example, you may say, you know what, Dr. Singh, I don't want to get a clinical psychology PhD where I would be learning to do research. Now I want to get a PsyD so that I can be a practitioner, focus more on being a practitioner. The thing is that even if you're going to be only working in field, what evidence-based best practices are when you're working with clients is based on the research literature. So if you say that you hate stats or you hate research methods, essentially what you're saying is that you hate the evidence base, and you will be less likely to understand how it is that that evidence base has been developed, or when you read new articles, you're going to have a hell of a time trying to figure out how you should modify your beliefs of the existing literature base in light of those new findings. That's a really bad response, okay? So that's number 2. Number 3, worst weaknesses, right? Number 3 is saying something like, I don't read the research literature. Which would kill me if somebody said that, especially if it's going to be a research-based program. If somebody says that they don't read the research literature and yet they want to work with me or they want to work with a specific colleague of mine in the same department, but if you don't read the research literature, how would you know that? Maybe you went to their website and, you read that 1 or 2 paragraph bio of them and you say, oh, that's cool. Or maybe you went to their CV and you took a look and you said, oh, they seem to be doing similar types of stuff that I'm interested in. But remember, when you're applying especially to a doctoral level program and to a lesser extent a master's level program, it doesn't really matter what you want. What it matters is the goodness of fit between what the grad school supervisor is already doing and what your interests are, okay? Again, I've said this in other videos, I'll say it again now. It's a super big blow to people's egos, but you are a soldier, you are not the general, right? You need to be able to follow orders. And if that's something that you can't do, I struggled with it too. If that's something you can't do, don't go to graduate school, okay? I say this in other videos as well. Okay, the other thing is that it's not just don't say anything about, like, I don't read the research literature. Please never mention any kind of, like, pop books. So my field is psychology, so it would be like pop psychology books, things by people like Malcolm Gladwell, for example. And I love Malcolm Gladwell. I think he's a brilliant man. He has a beautiful way of writing, but he is not somebody who is known in the peer-reviewed research literature as being some, groundbreaking psychological scientist, okay? So if you're applying for, a clinical psych PhD and people say, whose work do you like to read? And you say Malcolm Gladwell, that's really bad. I'm just telling you right now. So never say something like that. Okay, next one. Number 4, worst weakness is to say something like, I'm stubborn and I want to do things my own way. In other words, I don't listen. I literally had somebody once say in a grad school interview, I find that I usually think that I know better than other people, and so sometimes I have a hard time listening to instructions. Oh my God. That person, suffice it to say, did not get into the program, right? When we're undergrads, and especially if we're like top of our class as undergrads, oftentimes when we go to grad school, we have this sense that, well, I rocked undergrad, so therefore I'm going to rock grad school as well. But remember that the function of undergrad is basically to give you kind of like a broad perspective of a field versus the doctorate, especially, or a master's degree, supposed to give you a level of expertise. And essentially what has to happen is that grad school supervisors, if they're doing their job, they got to break you down a little bit in terms of showing you that you don't really know anything, or the amount that you know is really very little at the end of the day. And then after that, their job is to be able to build you up. And even though you may have kind of like less ground to stand on, that ground that you do have at that stage is going to be really, really solid, okay? But the thing is that they can't do that if you're too stubborn, too egotistical, or if you say, this is the way it's going to be, I want things to be my way. Remember that at the end of the day, the goal of grad school is to be able to get the letters after your name and get the heck out of there. It is not to do your most seminal research. One of my favorite videos on this entire channel that I recommend that you check out is all about this. It's called The 5 Biggest Doctoral Dissertation Mistakes. And that is a great video to watch, even if you're just applying right now. So please do check that video out, and I go into more of that, okay? And finally, number 5, worst weakness in terms of what you can say for grad school interviews is something along the lines of, I am slow at learning and need to ask a lot of questions before I understand how to do things. Oh my goodness. This is so annoying to grad school supervisors, the idea that, it's like, oh, can you explain it one more time? Just like step by step, please, just one more time. I'm going to write down the exact steps. No, right? You need to learn how to learn. You need to know how to be able to do it. For example, my grad school supervisor, I've got 2 doctorates. First one's from Oxford. My grad school supervisor at Oxford used to, if I ever asked something like that, and I said, whose work should I be reading? He'd throw out a couple of names. Sometimes they'd be misspelled. Sometimes he'd be confusing one person with another person just because they were co-authors on one of the papers he had actually wanted me to read, but I would have to kind of guess and go and do my own scavenger hunting, etc. I learned a tremendous amount by essentially him not telling me exactly what to do. And remember, one of the biggest mistakes you can make in doing the doctorate is literally having no good response when somebody says, hey, why'd you do something like this in your dissertation project? And you say something like, oh, my supervisor told me to do it. No, we're not going to say something like that. It's very inappropriate, okay? That's a terrible response to have. In terms of being slow at learning, it is fine for you to kind of take your time to be able to master something, but it's not necessary to say that in terms of that being one of your weaknesses, right? A lot of people, I actually made a video response to a question that was asked to me, and the question was something along the lines of, do grad school supervisors like it when you ask questions? And the thing is like, to an extent, yes, but largely no. Make sure that you've exhausted every potential source before you go and you ask them questions. Their time is very valuable, as yours will be very valuable as well when you get to that level, okay? I know it's frustrating feeling junior and this kind of stuff. I did too, so please know that I understand it, right? I'm not taking anybody's side here. I'm not taking the side of students or the side of faculty members. There's pros and cons on both sides, guys, okay? So that's what I have to say in terms of what I perceive to be the 5 worst weaknesses that you can mention in grad school interviews. If you want to book a one-on-one session with me, please go to the website below and book now. We can do some practice interviews and we can go over your responses. Looking forward to talking to you soon. Talk to you in the next one. Peace.